everyone. So today I met up with a local seller in the Brisbane area and I picked up three things from him. So I got this vintage Boba Fett figure, this vintage Darth Vader figure, and a reproduction Chewbacca Bowcaster. So I'm going to talk about the Boba Fett first. So the seller did say that he was in a bad state of disrepair. So as you can see, he's missing that hand, and you can see that melting that's characteristic of these figures. Apparently, it's the result of the reaction between the material of the hand, which is rubbery, and this hard plastic material. And on this other hand, you can see that same melting as well. But the good thing about this is that his antenna is intact and working, and if I look through him, I can see right through, and he has that vintage plastic smell. His joints seem to be all tight. In fact, the shoulders are a bit too tight to hear that squeaking sound. It's just grinding a bit, so I might not move those shoulders as much, but all seems good. One thing though is that the paint is slightly faded. Well, not slightly, it's quite faded. So this section is supposed to be red, but it's now a sort of greenish, swampy color. And there's a bit of yellowing on his arms as well. And some of those stickers have peeled off, but could probably easily just print new ones. Still trying to decide if I'm going to repaint this faded red or not. Just noticed as well that the yellowing is pretty noticeable on the leg part, where it seems as though the back of the leg is really yellow and the front isn't so much, so you can just see that contrast a bit more. And it's the same for that other leg here. For those of you who don't know, he's obviously supposed to come with that jetpack or backpack, which I don't have, and it's quite expensive to buy, apparently. Should have checked before I got this. But the seller who gave me this did kindly give me a reproduction missile. So that should come in handy when I do find a backpack, or make one, we'll see. He's also supposed to come with those braids, which is supposed to hang around the shoulder, and apparently they're known as Wookiee scalps, which is quite morbid to think about. This belt, the seller did give me this belt as an extra, so it's not original to this figure, and I'm not so sure if it's a reproduction or original, but it does the job just fine. What else? So he's supposed to come with a jetpack, he's supposed to come with a gun, and the cape. So no cape here, but the cape should be the easiest thing to replace. I have been watching Toy Polloi's videos on how he fixed his old Boba Fett up, but I believe he pieced that out of like different parts, so I only have this one figure, so it's going to be a bit trickier for me. But he did manage to replace a missing hand, and he used an Action Man figure hand for that. I don't have one on me right now, but I might try making one. And here is Darth Vader. So the seller did tell me beforehand that his limbs, well, his legs specifically, were really loose, so they were like a marionette's legs, he said. The arms, however, are quite tight, so they do retain poses. The head is quite loose, but that doesn't really matter so much. It's just the legs are really important for him to stand, of course, so right now he can't stand, he just falls over like that. And of course, one of the quick fixes is to wrap a cord or yarn around, just around the joint, so that should tighten it. I'll give it a try. Okay, now I've got this embroidery floss, and I'm gonna try to use it to tighten Darth Vader's leg joints. So let's see if this works. I imagine it would work. I don't see why it wouldn't. So let's just wind that around. That and oh, well, there you go. It's tighter already. So I'll just cut this off, tie it up, cut it off, and then I'll do it for the other leg. But wow, that's more effective than I expected. So that's good. Alright, so I've done that same winding thing with the embroidery floss on the other leg, and as you can see, Darth Vader can now stand on his own. So those joints are nice and tight now, and he should be able to hold that standing pose, or a kicking pose. I don't know why you would only want one leg up in the first place, but there you go, easy fix. And for those of you who don't know, obviously Darth Vader needs his cape and his lightsaber. So again, I watched those videos by Toy Polloi, and he made it look really easy. Uh, well, of course, it's not as easy as he makes it look, but he does have a free pattern of that Vader cape online. It's really so nice of him to put them up for free. I'm just gonna print that out. Apparently, it takes 4 pieces of A4 paper, 4 sheets, to print that one pattern out because it's so big. But shouldn't be too difficult. Just the lightsaber would be pretty hard to do. Toy Polloi did use an acrylic perspex rod for that for the blade, and those are quite expensive. And in Australia, they're even more expensive than they are in the UK. So unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to make the saber the same way he did. Might just find a cheap replacement somewhere, or at least a replacement for the blade, and then I can just make the hilt myself to match the old Kenner version. So we'll see how that goes. But at least for Vader, I'm only missing 2 parts, whereas for Boba Fett, he needs a new hand, a new jetpack, the Wookiee scalps, and the cape. So that'll be more of a job for me. So I've just measured them, and Boba Fett stands at 13.5 inches, about 35 centimeters, I'd say. And Darth Vader stands at 15 inches, or around 38 centimeters. But these two are taller than Han and Luke. So Vader is not the tallest figure, though. Of course, Chewbacca is the tallest. Now, of course, Darth Vader was one of the first large-size action figures to be produced by Kenner, in their Star Wars line, that is, and Boba Fett was a later addition. So in the back, it says 1978 for Darth Vader and 1979 for Boba Fett. Well, there's not much to say about this Bowcaster. It is 3D printed, it's a reproduction, and it looks quite good. So there's a bit of, you can kind of tell that it was 3D printed by the way that it looks. So you can see those striations running through. That's just a product of how it was made. But I actually have never seen an original Chewie Bowcaster in person, so I wouldn't be able to know how different it looks, but it looks pretty spot on to me. It's a lot bigger than I thought. And this replica Bowcaster is about 14 centimeters in length, about 5.5 inches. So it is larger than I thought it would be, just because I've never seen one in person before. This Reproduction Boba Fett missile, which I technically didn't pay for, so the seller gave this to me as a sort of gift. It measures about 3.5 inches, I'd say, about 9 centimeters. So I'm just going to keep this in the package until I have a jetpack to put this in. I guess I should say that I am a lifelong Star Wars fan, but I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, so I didn't have access to these wonderful Kenner figures from the 70s and 80s. So what I had was those Hasbro Revenge of the Sith, Attack of the Clones figures, which were good in their own way. Had those Collector Series figures, which came out in 96, 97. But these are just really different from anything that I've handled before, so I'm really interested in collecting more of these. They really have their own charm to them. So what really sparked my interest in collecting vintage Star Wars was, I guess, me realizing that I didn't own any 12-inch figures of the heroes at all. So I didn't have any Han, I didn't have any Luke, Leia, Chewie, or Lando. And I figured, if I were gonna get figures of Luke, Han, Leia, Chewie, then I might as well get the originals. And I just figured that they were too expensive or too out of reach, but I got this good deal on eBay, and now they're on their way. But because the shipping for those figures has taken so long, I kind of just kept going through eBay for the other figures and Facebook Marketplace, and I happened upon this seller who was selling an R2-D2. When I contacted him, it was already sold, but I asked him if he had any other vintage 12-inch Star Wars figures, and he offered me Boba Fett, Darth Vader, and the Stormtrooper. Fortunately, he was selling the Stormtrooper for more than I was willing to pay, but I got Vader and Boba Fett. So, I did order my Han, Leia, Chewie, Ben, and Luke figures about a week ago. Still waiting on them. Should take another 2 weeks, 2 or 4 weeks until they arrive. But in my excitement, I went out and bought this cheap Han Solo, Alden Ehrenreich Han Solo figure. So it was on clearance for 10 Australian dollars. And the reason I bought this was because all the figures that I bought from eBay don't have any belts or weapons. So my Han needs a belt. I opened this up, cut it up a bit, and I was able to take his rubbery belt off and the blaster. So it's a good sculpt, I would say. It's a pretty good sculpt of Han Solo's blaster. It's pretty well detailed, as is the belt. I'd say the belt is a bit too detailed for the Kenner figure. I'm not so sure. Yeah, it's a lot more textured than I imagined the original Kenner belt would be, but that's fine. It should do as a good stand-in before I get an authentic vintage Kenner belt and blaster for Han. So I'm just gonna sell this without the belt and blaster and hope that somebody buys it so I can get rid of this thing. Because I do like the movie, but I'm not a fan of these shampoo bottle figures with very limited articulation. So not my cup of tea. Okay, thank you all for watching my first ever toy review video. Do let me know if you have any suggestions about how I should fix up the Vader and Boba Fett, and I will post a video once I get to work on those. So I guess I'll see you then.